Video demonstrates how to protect and license a LiveCode application with Quick License. This ensures only authorized users can run your application on a specified number of computers. Here we see our LiveCode application. We have it in a source folder. We've also created an empty output folder, and we see the Quick License and Add License application that are going to be used for this process. Quick License can define several different types of licenses, some examples being a time-limited trial license, a product license that once activated runs forever on that computer, a try-buy license where the user can try it for a while and then permanently buy and activate it, or a subscription license where the user has to pay you a monthly, quarterly, or annual fee to use your software. The process to apply licensing to an application consists of defining the license with Quick License, and that generates a ticket file that we'll put in our source folder, and then we can apply that license to our application using one of two ways. We can use the Add License Wrapping tool to wrap our application into the protected application, or we can insert a little bit of code in our LiveCode application to call the Quick License runtime directly. Finally, there's several different activation processes supported by Quick License. A couple examples being a simple offline manual activation process or an online serial number activation process, and we're going to be demonstrating several of those different options in the next few minutes. For the first example, let's define a simple product license with manual activation, and then we'll apply it to our LiveCode application with the Add License Wrapping tool. So we start by launching Quick License. We find an empty row where we've entered the name of a license, LiveCode product, version number, and security code. You'll use that information in a moment. And if we click on the first column of that row, it brings up our license dialog where we can define the details of this license type. So we give it a name, select master ticket over here. That checkbox master ticket of new records, allow same computer reactivation, and on the activation screen we set activation required, machine calculated, and we see a calculation over here. That's really all the information we need to set up for a manual product license. And we're going to go back to the ticket folder or ticket tab here, and we're going to click Make Ticket. And that has now generated a ticket file with all the information about this type of license. If we go and look in our source folder, we see the ticket file that's been generated. So we have our two files now. We have our unprotected LiveCode application, and we have a ticket file that defines everything about the license that we want to apply. Now we're going to use the Add License Wrapping tool to apply our license to our LiveCode application. So we're going to launch Add License, go to a new empty record here. We can name the record, we can select the application that we want to protect from our source folder, and we'll select the license that we want to apply. We'll select an output folder where we want to generate the protected application. So we'll select the output folder there. And we have to fill in a couple of other bits of information. We need the version number and the security code that came from the main Quick License screen. And now we're ready to wrap our application with that license. So we click the Build button, takes a moment or so. At the end of the process, we'll have our protected application in the output folder. So if we go to the output folder now, we see our protected application. We can rename that whatever we want, and it's ready to distribute to a customer. When a customer downloads and launches your application for the first time, they're going to be presented with an activation screen. On that screen is shown a unique request number. It's like the fingerprint of their computer, and they're going to have to give you that number by phone or email or some method and you're going to give them back the unique activation code they need to activate your application to their computer. So let's go to our quick license application that we have running on our development computer, bring up the license dialog for this license. And on the activation panel, there's a place where this request number from the customer's computer can be entered into the field here. And when you click the activation button, it shows the unique activation code required on the customer computer. When the customer clicks Activate Now, the software is activated to their machine, and now your LiveCode application is running. Each launch thereafter is automatically going to launch your application and start running. Now let's demonstrate a subscription license with an online serial number activation process. There's two parts to the setup process. There's the quick license part where we're defining the subscription license, and there is the online activation server part, which can be accomplished with a self-hosted activation server or an account on the Safe Activation service, which we'll demonstrate here. The actual setup process is best learned by following a step-by-step tutorial, and there is such a tutorial that comes with quick license, but we're going to outline the process in the next few minutes. So let's start with the quick license. We're going to define one row of information about our license. So you see we have a license named LiveCode subscription, version number, security code, and let's bring up the details of that license setup. So we have set master ticket of new records, master ticket, we select it over here, and we'll go ahead and set the allow same computer reactivation checkbox. On the activation screen, activation required, machine calculated, and on the subscription screen, we've set it to monthly, request dependent. And on the safe activation screen, we've set up some information that will link it to our online activation server. We'll also be going to our online activation server and setting up some of that stuff, because you can't just set up everything in quick license and then it's everything in safe activation. You have to jump back and forth a little bit between the two environments. Safe activation is an online service used to activate various different products, and including quick license. So let's kind of look at what we did to set up the stuff for this type of license. We have, under the serial number section, let's go to the group page, and we've defined a group called to-do list subscription. Click Save Data at the bottom. And then we were able to generate a batch of serial numbers. And if we want to look at that batch of serial numbers, they're in the range from slots 331 to 340. So let's go back to the serial number edit screen, type 331, a group of 10, and we see the batch of serial numbers that we've already generated. And they're assigned to the group name to-do list subscription, and they're given a max activation count of 1, indicating that this serial number will activate 1 unique computer. If we change that number to 5, that serial number can activate 5 unique computers. To generate this batch of serial numbers, we went to the serial number select and search page, and in this section we entered the starting ID of the range of serial numbers and ending ID, and then the group we wanted to assign it to, how many activations, the type of serial number, and when we click generate, that's what generated this batch of serial numbers. So we have our group of serial numbers. Now we also have to define a little template for the types of information we want to collect in the activation screen. And we do that on the custom form we can click Add and define a new little form. We've already done that, so if we click List, and this is the form we've already defined. So here we see the name of the form, and most importantly, what field of information we want to collect from the user during the activation process. So we're collecting first name, last name, the request number of the computer, the serial number the user is going to enter to activate, and an email address. When we go to, now we have a list of serial numbers, we have a custom form, and finally we're going to go to the product page. We've already set it up, so it's listed here, and here's the details of that setup process. We've named our record of information, and we have an activation calculation, a ticket code, and these are coming from the setup that we've already done in Quick License. So on the activation screen, we see the activation calculation, and on the ticket screen, we see the ticket code. So that's where those 2 bits of information come. We've set it up as a monthly subscription, request dependent, enable activation, serial number required, set a few checkboxes here. And finally, we have linked our product setup to a group of serial numbers here and to an activation screen here. Again, the details of the setup process are described in a step-by-step tutorial. So at this point, we've essentially set up everything on our safe activation side. And if we go to Save Data button at the bottom, we see some information that also needs to be set up on the Quick License side. We need the DB number placed here, the vendor ID placed here, the product ID placed here, detect internet or selected radio button selected. We want a custom activation screen with serial number, and in the fields we can actually set up these fields that build our custom activation screen manually, but the easier way is to click this button. It'll just set it up for us by retrieving that information from our activation server that's already set up. And finally, in addition to that, there's one other thing we have to set up for a subscription type license, and that is on the license option screen. We want to set up some automated capabilities like remote reset, license release, restore, show activation data, but most importantly, for a subscription license, we want to set this checkbox, retrieve subscription code from server. So once we have all this set up in the Quick License side and in the Safe Activation side, we're now ready to go and click the Modify Ticket button, and it generates a new ticket file that is ready to be used to apply to our LiveCode application. We've now defined our monthly subscription license with Quick License and set up the online side by filling in several screens of information in our Safe Activation account, and finally generated the ticket file that's now sitting in our source folder. So we want to apply this license to our LiveCode application, and we're going to do that with the Add License Wrapping tool. So if we launch Add License, here you see we already have a record of information set up. So we've named the record, we've selected our unprotected LiveCode application, we've selected the ticket file that defines the license that we want to apply, and the output folder where we want to generate the protected application. And here we see the name of the ticket, the version number, and security code that came from Quick License. So when we click the Build button, it's now wrapping our LiveCode application with that license, and the ending result is going to be in our output folder. We see our protected application that can be renamed to whatever we want, and it's ready for distribution to a customer. When selling a software subscription, you're going to want to preset the subscriber checkbox in that batch of serial numbers, and there's a command in your Safe Activation account to do it. That way, when a customer makes a purchase, they'll receive a serial number that they can use to activate the license. And as long as they continue to pay the monthly amount, they can continue to use the software. If later they decide they don't want to be a subscriber anymore, you can clear the subscriber checkbox. And then the following month, the first launch, your application will do a silent ping to the server, detect that the subscriber checkbox for that serial number has been cleared, and turn off the license. Now you can automate the delivery of the serial number with a fully automated purchase and delivery process, where when the user makes a purchase with a credit card, they receive a serial number in an email message and they can activate and run. It automatically charges the appropriate amount each month. If they cancel the subscription, it also clears the subscriber checkbox for you. Let's go ahead and launch our application. And we see that we're presented with an activation screen. And again, the user is going to have to enter the serial number that they received during the purchase process, the other information that you want to collect in the activation screen. And when they click Activate Now, that information is sent to the online activation service to determine whether to immediately grant activation to this computer, and now they're up and running. Each launch thereafter, it just launches your application. So far, we've demonstrated how you can apply a manual activation process or an online serial number activation process to your LiveCode application by wrapping the license around your application with the Add License Wrapping tool. As an alternative, you can insert a few lines of code in your LiveCode application and call the Quick License runtime directly to bind it to a named license. You might be wondering, why would you want to do this? Well, there are some advantages. For example, you have more flexibility on how the licensing process works. You would be able to, for example, include multiple different license types, and then on launch, your application can give the user different options for how they want to license the application. You can also get full access to all the runtime commands within the Quick License runtime to do some pretty sophisticated things. If you want to apply the Quick License API to your LiveCode application, you'll want to download the free LiveCode QL onto your Mac or Windows computer. It comes with a couple of sample applications, the source code of those applications, a PDF describing the process. There's a sample ticket defining a simple product license, and also the Quick License runtime file. This application, LiveCode License, just shows how you can apply a few commands to bind your LiveCode application to a named license, so that on launch, the activation dialog pops up and you can activate the license, or it will quit if the license is not activated. Let's actually demonstrate the process, however, using the LiveCode message little test application that comes with this LiveCode QL. So if we launch the application, you'll see that it has a place where you can put a request number, send that request command to the runtime, and it will process it and return back a response string. Let's go ahead and try that. First, let's do this process by just sending a different command. We'll send the command request number. And when you send this command to the runtime, it's simply going to return the computer unique request number of that computer into the response field. So the way your LiveCode application sends commands to the runtime, there's several different ways of doing it. One way is using the clipboard. Another way is using a control file. So using the clipboard process demonstrated here, you can put the command into the clipboard. You can, with the send button, launch the runtime. It processes the command, puts the output back in the clipboard and quits itself, and then the from clipboard just retrieves that and displays it into this field. And this button actually combines all three parts. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's send this command to the runtime, and we'll see the response shown here. Let's try another example. In this case, we're going to send a standard request message to the runtime and get back a response. And based on the response, our application could then continue to run or quit. For a simple implementation of the API, this might be the only command that you actually need to send from your LiveCode application. The command is a set of parameters separated by semicolons. It starts with the word shared and then the base name of the ticket file that defines our license, the version number and security code that came from Quick License when you created this license. And again, we're going to click the button here that sends the command to the runtime. In this case, we see it actually pops up a manual activation dialog. And for this simple license, we just set it up so the activation code happens to be the same as the request number. So we're just going to put that into the field here and click Activate Now. And now we've successfully activated the license and the response comes back. In your actual implementation, which we'll show in a moment, this is essentially what your application is doing when it launches the first time to activate a specific license. To use the Quick License API, you're going to be distributing these 3 files to the user. Let's take a look at this little application in LiveCode. So we've opened it up and you can see it's simply a Hello World application with a quit button. Now let's look at the source code that binds it to this named license. If we bring up the code window, we can see that on startup, we're going to put our command into the clipboard with a request colon prefix. And then we're going to launch the Quick License runtime with a platform-specific path to the runtime file. Next, we're going to periodically poll the clipboard and wait for a response. Once we get the response, we're going to then split the response into semicolon separated parts, and then we look at a couple of specific fields in that response, and that tells us whether or not our license has been activated. If we get a return code of less than 0, then some error messages has occurred. For example, the serial number is not valid, or the user has already activated the license on another computer, so they're not going to be allowed to activate it again on this computer, or some other message which we'll present to the user and then quit. Otherwise, we just go ahead and run the application normally. To demonstrate the activation process again for our standalone app, we're first going to go locate and delete our active ticket file. So we're going to go to our computer, go to the users folder, the shared folder, the ticket folder, and locate and delete our ticket file from this location. And that just allows the activation process to play out again. So we're going to launch the application. We're presented with an activation dialog. Again, the manual activation process, the way this was set up, it's the activation code is the same as the displayed request number. So we click Activate Now, and now our Hello World application comes up. Each launch thereafter, it validates the license and presents our application.